Welcome, Provers. Thank you to everyone outside of our Prove community as well that are joining us for our special Power Hour during Pride Month. Prove is proud to be a supporter of the LGBT plus community, and we're constantly working to promote a culture that fosters inclusion and individuality. We're committed to a safe and supportive environment where every individual can be their whole, authentic self and flourish. With that said, I'm so proud and honored to have a very special group join me today to chat about today's topic around active and intersectional allyship and how we can celebrate Pride all year long. To kick off our panelists, I'd like to introduce you to Shiva Raichandani. Shiva is a multidisciplinary, non-binary dancer and filmmaker from Hong Kong, Indonesia, India, and now the UK. And in fact, Shiva is joining us from the UK. They've competed on Britain, India, and France's Got Talent, have been commissioned by Netflix to create a documentary on queer art and consult on inclusive practices within the wider entertainment industry. Also joining us is Matt Hurwitz. Matt has been with Wells Fargo for 10 years and is an EVP leading the commercial banking communications team. Matt is a frequent media spokesperson for the company, leads 2 DE&I councils, and outside of the office has been a volunteer cook at the Ronald McDonald House for 15 years. And then, of course, our very own Michelle Wheeler, who for the rest of this call, as everybody knows, we'll refer to as Wheels. She is a 4-year prover that supports our company culture of inclusion, authenticity, and honesty. She is an SVP on our revenue team and, among other things, mentors the team throughout their career at Prove. All of these amazing folks on this panel are renowned LGBTQ plus leaders in their space and are truly paving the way for others to start conversations that are inclusive and help promote change in the community. Before we start, just a quick reminder, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the question box in the Zoom chat and we'll try to answer them all as we go along. So don't feel like you have to wait till the end. We'll jump in along the way. Okay, so to the panelists, I gave a brief intro of each of y'all, but I'd love for each of you to please dive a bit deeper into your professional and personal background as an LGBTQ member of the LGBTQ plus community. And let's go ahead and start with Matt.
Well, hey, everybody. Good morning, evening, afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you so much for having me. It's a big honor to be here with such interesting panelists. I feel a little bit lame in comparison to Wheels and especially Shiva. I can't dance, but would love to. Let's see. Yeah, so I'm at Wells Fargo. I've been here for about 10 years. I head up a team that supports one of our lines of business. We cover all manners of communication, so internal, external, crisis, all sorts of things like that. I grew up in Boston, was raised there and lived there for 25 years. Moved to Singapore for 3 years, so got a bit of a global experience and exposure to the world, which was a life-changing time for me for a lot of different reasons. And one of the reasons why I did in fact go over there was to just kind of figure out who I was and who I wanted to be and kind of just the things that a lot of us in the community struggle with. And it seems like a really long way to go to figure that out. But I think the results were pretty fantastic. And I've been here in San Francisco for almost 20 years. I am married for 9 to my husband, Bruce. We have a 9.5-month-old insane rescue puppy named Stanley, who we love very much. And I think I've been out for, almost 25 years now. So I think probably I can stop there. We can get into a lot of other things as we get to the question period, but I will stop right there.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Matt. That's what a great start to the conversation. Unfortunately, I think we've lost Wheels now. This is just, I apologize for this. Let's go ahead and go to you, Shiva, if you can give us a bit about your story, and then hopefully we'll have Wheels back in to wrap up with her.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you. And Matt, I can't wait for the day that we get together and dance. I'm sure you're a great dancer. Hi, everyone. I'm Shiva Raichandani, and dialing in from the UK. I am, as mentioned, a non-binary artist, primarily within the disciplines of dance and film. I try and use the power of storytelling to create inclusive spaces for positive gender diverse representation in mainstream media. And a lot of my work centers around challenging the heteronormative narratives that dominate those spaces, especially given my upbringing in the Asian entertainment space, where you have a lot of regressive, archaic beliefs around gender identity, and creating opportunities for marginalized genders within entertainment by mobilizing community. And as I mentioned, I grew up in a conservative religious family, and we didn't have the vocabulary to address concepts of gender variance, although it's obviously existed for time. But we didn't also realize the compounded effect of all that intersectional identities that I hold with my race, ethnicity, gender identity, and expression as well. And it's only recently that I've used non-binary for myself, and that feels safe, comfortable, because also, again, the conversation around being non-binary varies so much from the places that I've lived. And I'm currently, because having worked in different settings and industries as well, fashion, banking, education, charities, government, I've had to code switch a lot, change my voice pitch, try and be a bit masculine to conform to that heteronormative, heteropatriarchal expectation. But dance and film, the arts have been my means of communication. The fluidity of dance has informed my own, its expanse has informed my own. So that's sort of a bit about me. And I'm very grateful to be in such beautiful company here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shiva. And I think for us, this panel is going to be just really insightful because we have kind of that range of corporate America, global, the intersectionality perspective, the arts, which to me is, you know, kind of closer to the like real representation of the world outside. So I'm really, really excited to have this. Again, I'm hoping that the technology issues don't become too much of a distraction. We have lost Wheels. I think they'll keep working on that. And when we get her, we'll make her carry the entire tail end of this conversation. I'm just kidding. So one more thing before I want to jump into some kind of questions that we've have given some thought to, just for the folks that are dialed in. All three, Matt and Shiva and Wheels, have put some really great either posts or blogs or different articles out. A lot of the ones I've seen are in LinkedIn. So I encourage everybody to take a look at those, you know, later after the call, because there's some really, really great insight there. Okay, so, you know, I think one of the things folks really struggle with is, you know, how to start a conversation, you know, outside of the community and in a way that feels safe and supportive. And I think it goes both ways. I think, you know, if anybody that did see Wheels' post, she talks a lot about, you know, as a member of the community, kind of put yourself out there and have the conversation. At the same time, if you're not, you know, if you're an ally or you want to be an ally, you know, what's a good way to approach somebody in the community so that it feels like it's a good conversation, it's supportive. So I don't know, Matt, do you want to maybe start that discussion?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll start from one of the articles that you referenced. I had written something recently that got published, which is a new ground for me, but it was about just being a relatively senior leader at a large company and being out in corporate America. And I don't think this is a one size fits all. And so I don't intend, what I'm saying is from my perspective, it isn't sort of a preachy and this is, you have to do this or you should do that. For me, it's important to be out, and I've been out for a long time, and that, you know, that led, a lot of struggles led to that point. And I just think as somebody who's, you know, on the tail end of his 40s, you know, I think of younger folks now who are struggling in the ways that I did, and it could be, you know, struggling differently and harder or worse or whatever that might be. So I do personally feel a responsibility, and it's a privilege to be able to be out and to work for a company that supports me. You know, while I also recognize I work for a large company where it's probably 50-50 down the middle, your sort of ideologies and your beliefs and your politics. And so I know that it isn't going to be a uniform, you know, yay, that's amazing, we are so proud of you and we think it's great that you're, you know, a gay white male or whatever. But for me personally, I feel like that's an opportunity and a privilege and a responsibility. So you know, I try very hard to use my voice in a way that would hopefully, you know, help others and make others feel supported. So not only folks within the community, but also people who either are allies or who are curious or who want to ask questions or or somewhere on that spectrum where they're like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And so part of that is, I think we just have to, all of us, operate from a place of grace and kindness and maybe assuming good intentions. So I am very comfortable putting who I am out there. And so, part of that is, I think, being a Bostonian. Part of that is just lived in experiences of being out for a long time and being really happy with my life. So I'm very willing to share, but I like when people ask me questions. And I think people, I hope people feel comfortable doing so. I would encourage people, if you're not, take a chance, be brave, be courageous, ask a question, know that even if you say something, the wrong way, or don't ask it in a perfect way, or whatnot, that's how we're going to get to greater sort of understanding and, a relatability. And I also think of, looking outside of the LGBTQ plus area. The last couple of years in this country have been really hard for a lot of folks who are parts of different communities that have been or currently are being marginalized. So I think about, like, if I want to talk to one of my Black African-American friends or colleagues, or a friend who's part of the AAPI community and their family has experienced violence, I am taking that advice and sort of encouraging myself and pushing myself harder to try to engage in those conversations, because I think the more that we do that, the more that we have the courage and the willingness to listen and put our sort of biases aside and our experiences aside, we're going to get much, much better outcomes. And I think we're going to get to know each other better and also feel more comfortable engaging in these hard conversations. So I think that's kind of how I think about it, bigger picture.
That's terrific, Matt. And I think, one of the things that we've learned as we've had a variety of these power hours is this whole idea that silence could be deadly, right? That not speaking up is so much more dangerous than we ever, imagined, right? So I appreciate that. So I'm going to go to Wheels, because we didn't get you at the front end. And Wheels, I'm not going to make you go all the way back, because I know we're going to run out of time, but we're talking a bit about, how to start a conversation with somebody outside of the community. And I feel like your post is really all about that. And so maybe if you want to weave in your, kind of your experience as well as that, because I believe that you have this incredible experience of not being able to come out for a long time, and your experience in the military, and then being able to come out, and, how do you even, start those conversations?
Yeah, apologies. For some reason, my laptop decided to self-destruct in the middle of the conversation. But it's true. I had two coming out stories. The first coming out story was coming out when I was in high school, and approaching that conversation with love to the people that I went to school with, and trusting that our relationship was strong enough to go to the next level, to know each other. Now, then I had the experience of having to suck all that back in when I joined the military. And that was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life, to have to attest to the fact that I was not gay. And in fact, to have to hide it. I had a girlfriend at the time. Her name when I was in the military was Stephen, not Stella. So that was very difficult. And when I came out of the military, I made the decision that I was not going to participate in a world where I could not be authentic. And I think that the best way to start a conversation from either side of the coin, right? From within the LGBTQ plus community, as well as within the straight community, I think the best way to approach the conversation is with authenticity and caring. Right? Because I want you all to know me and all the facets of me, because nobody's one dimension, because I care about you. And I think that you probably want the same. So that's the position that I would take in the conversation.
That's terrific. And Wheels, I know this is in the post, but in case folks haven't had a chance to read it, what really, there's so many things there that resonated, but that statement that you have to actually sign when you join the military, and the consequences of being found out. Can you talk a bit about that? And then that kind of the experience with the march, and, just that whole, I can't imagine the anxiety that must have created.
Yeah, so back when I was in the military, you had to sign an attestation that you were not homosexual. and that you had never participated in any activities with, quote, that community. I signed that piece of paper, and today it is, I mean, it chokes me up. Today, it is still one of the largest betrayals I did against myself and the most difficult. But had I not played by the rules, Don't Ask, Don't Tell didn't exist yet. Had I not played by the rules, I could have been court-martialed and expelled from the military. So it really was that rigid and that severe. Now, the other side of it is that at the same time, I was an activist for our community. And I was marching on Washington, and I was marching in the streets of Boston and New York and Chicago. So kind of playing this double life and being very careful not to let the boundaries cross, when in fact I ended up on the front page of the Washington Post from a march on Washington for the LGBT plus community. So it was frightening to me. Even though the image is this big, it was frightening to me to be there. And, you know, I had to come to terms with how I was going to deal with the conversation that was going to come my way, that I wasn't necessarily prepared for.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay, I want to move over to Shiva just a little bit, because I think it's really important. I also want to kind of get your perspective on how to have these conversations. And frankly, I think the non-binary conversation is probably the most challenging, because folks don't want to screw it up, you know, and they just, you know, have all the best intentions. So I'm very interested in your perspective on that.
Sure, thank you. I think, again, having these conversations really depends on the setting and how safe you feel to have them, and whether you're in a position to talk about it safely. And first, this is, again, it's about not worrying about getting things wrong, because making mistakes are okay. It's about learning from them and doing better next time, and committing to doing better next time sustainably. And I'd rather people ask me questions than not, because it's just easier that way, and it's easier to diffuse that tension as well. For example, when having conversations about pronouns, it's something that we can do very easily about sharing your own pronouns, whether you identify as LGBT plus or not. And one thing that we did this exercise in a workshop, it was like, well, how do we remember someone's pronouns, especially if they've changed and you know that person? So one thing we do is take 3 sentences, say 3 sentences with their correct pronouns with positive affirmations. They are a great dancer. They are a great speaker. So you instill that, and sometimes rewiring takes time, unlearning takes time, but we have to commit to that. And whether it's something, sometimes if it's something that you can look up yourself, that's something you can do as well, because not every queer person is willing to take on sort of that emotional labor to educate, because of how hyper aware and sensitive they are about their identities and sometimes being singled out. But on the flip side, there are wonderful people who are out there willing to converse and have a conversation. And it's also about the understanding that there is no monolith experience. Vocabulary varies wherever you are. Vocabulary keeps evolving. There are new terms and labels coming up. When you further use cultural filters, you'll see that that varies too, because a lot of these labels and terms are westernized concepts that don't work elsewhere. And there is that natural tendency to steer away from difference, but I think we need to harness that, like come back and respect that difference, but find commonality in the emotions, that storytelling aspect, because it's great to have that story sharing so that we can contextualize, empathize with, and normalize the experiences outside of our own bubbles. And also, one thing I'd love for everyone, however you identify, is to just sit with yourself and inquire what your relationship with your gender and sexuality is, and how you engage with sort of societal expectations of it. We all in our own ways define norms on a daily basis, but it's sort of trying to empathize with how someone does that differently to you, and then respecting that. So I think it's sort of like building that trust and empathy as well.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, I know for myself, I struggle with, you know, how to address non-binary folks. And I'm trying to slow down, and that's what's helping me a little bit, you know, it's like learning a new language and then trying to connect, along with connecting who the person is, you know, just trying to recognize and acknowledge the person. And I can't say I'm getting better. I have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I love what you
I'm
said there about
trying, and
centering the person, because it humanizes the process as well. So thank you
yeah.
for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm finding that that's helping. That's helping a bit, but I do think it takes thought. Like you have to really think about it. I want to switch a little bit here and maybe start with Matt. I think one of the things that we kind of underestimate is this concept of privilege, and that even within this community, the LGBTQ plus community, there are kind of levels of maybe privilege, and being a gay white man is different than being a, Latina, lesbian individual, and it varies, and people treat you differently. And I think the same, with all that whole spectrum. So Matt, maybe we could start with you and kind of give us your perspective on that.
Ooh. All right. I was hoping you're going to start with somebody else on this one. No, I mean, privilege it's a buzzword now, but I think it's an appropriate one, and it's one that I'm glad that we're talking about. And yeah, so I grew up the way that I grew up, and how I grew up with the family that I grew up in, and I ended up having an incredibly supportive, loving family. And yeah, as a white man who presents a certain way, I think I had different choices and opportunities available to me that some others don't and did not. So I was kind of able to walk through and not share this part of me until I was ready to do so. I played, as a college athlete, and I just sort of did what I did. I'm very aware of the privileges and the advantages that I've had just based off of the way that I look and the way that I present that others don't and would never have. I mean, I could, not that I would want to, but I can sort of hide parts of me. But if you are a Black woman, or whatever the dimensions that you have from a diversity perspective, those are certain things that I'm never, ever going to be able to fully relate to. And I can try my best to have empathy and understanding and to learn. Yeah, those are things that I have that others did not. So I just think it's important to be aware of it. And I know that there are conversations where people try to defend their own privilege and just minimize the experiences of others. And I would just say, please don't do that, just because, yes, you could be a white man who grew up in my town and maybe you didn't have money or you didn't have this, but just don't ever underestimate the experiences of others. And I think that's where we kind of have to really look at privilege and just to take a step back, think about who you are and what you've had and what you haven't, and then just look at it in relation to others and just really work hard to just listen and learn and have empathy, because I think that's where we get into a lot of problems. Is people want to make it a competition. Well, like, I didn't have this or I had that, but it's not what that's about. It's just sort of understanding your own experiences and doing the work to really try to walk through how others might have lived their lives.
Yeah, and I think that, Matt, I think it's interesting that, and maybe the folks on the line participating don't think about this, but even there is diversity within our own diversity, right? Our community has a privileged pecking order, so to speak. And it's unfortunate, but it's not only within our own community that we do that to each other, but it's also how we move in the world outside, and how that outside of our community, how that influences the way we move, the way we act, the way that we interact in the world. I mean, the thing that's always been interesting to me is that, there are a lot of, and some of you may not be aware of this, there are a lot of gay men who don't like gay women. There are a lot of gay women who don't like butch dykes. It's a whole myriad of privilege and almost division within our community as well as outside of our community. And I think that we have to work on that both internally and externally to make sure that the privilege is balanced and that we're accepting of our own diversity the same way we're asking the rest of the world to accept us.
That's a great point. Yeah, I don't know what else. Is there more you would say on that, Wheels, about that? Like when you said there's like a pecking order within the community of privilege.
Yeah, I mean, I think Shiva was about to pipe in with something, so I'd be interested to hear their.
Oh no, feel free to complete what you wanted to say. I'll chime in.
Okay. Well, I mean, it is a pecking order. There is a privilege of white gay men. Then there is a privilege of white gay women. then it goes back to Black gay men. I mean, it's really, it bounces back and forth, and the level of privilege is, maybe privilege isn't the right word, but it's even, you know, a level of acceptance within our own community, and a level of how we treat each other is different based on where we fit into those factions of our community.
Okay. Shiva, any comments on that?
Sorry, two things. I wanted to first touch upon what Matt alluded to about how we need to sort of reframe the language that we use when we talk about privilege, because privilege isn't a bad thing, but privilege left unused is a wasted opportunity. And so we need that positive spin on the discourse around privilege and focus on its ability to sort of be a tool for activating change. And everyone has some form of privilege, even within the marginalized communities. Everyone has inherent privileges that you're born with, some are acquired, and it all just, it mobilizes in different ways. In some places, my Asianness is a plus, but my queerness isn't. In other places, my queerness is a plus, but my Asian is a setback. So it really, it manifests in different ways. But I also want to touch upon the different kinds of privilege, because I think a lot of the conversation around privilege centers around white privilege and sort of the common understanding what privilege means. But I think it goes beyond that. There are so many other kinds of privilege, like privilege in being an extrovert, being privileged to tell stories, being visible. That's a privilege in itself. And I wanted, when we talk about that hierarchy within the community as well, I think trans people are so excluded in some of these narratives. Yeah. Take, for example, healthcare privilege. Trans people are excluded from medical care, where trans men can't access sort of clinics for abortion and that sort of stuff. So it's the hierarchy is very apparent, but it's also understanding that privilege manifests in various different ways. And yeah, just sort of wanted to touch on that basically. Yeah.
It can get kind of complicated, right? That's a lot of layering, you know, for folks to try to process and to kind of try to understand, you know, what's going on, right? So sometimes it's not like it's visible, right? Often it's not that somebody's saying, oh, that's your privilege, you know, at work, or that's this or that, you know, that whole point of, you know, trans healthcare, right? It's not like we stand out and just say it. It's just there, and we don't understand it, and we don't understand where privilege comes in. I think
that's something for us to... I just want to quickly, Sandra, sorry. You know, thank you so much for bringing up the point of invisible privilege, because I think even when we talk about, say, mental health and or disabilities where they're not obvious or apparent visibly, and which obviously queer people are disproportionately affected by, but then we don't consider that obviously at the face value. So sometimes that's the lack of privilege that we don't address as well. So thank you for pointing that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. This is kind of maybe a segue, but you know, I think what we're learning more and more is this kind of this not one size fits all, right? So there's a lot of diversity within the diversity of this LGBTQ plus community, and you know, how to have that, I'd say, empathetic conversation, how to help either within the community or for folks outside of the community to understand that diversity. And I want to start with you, Wheels. And if y'all have any examples, because I hear from time to time how people kind of come at folks in this community very generically and kind of thinking it's a homogeneous community when it's not at all. I don't know, Wheels, if you have any thoughts on it, and also any kind of examples or experiences.
Experiences as it relates to the interactions between the communities?
Well, from people outside of the community, maybe just making assumptions that, you know, this is a very kind of homogeneous community.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. In fact, I don't know if she's on, but my sister was going to join. And we had a great conversation last week about that in particular, and about the idea that there is just one group. You know, we are homosexuals. That's it. When in fact that's not accurate. You know, we have different colors and faces and walks and preferences, and you know, we are a community of lots of different perspectives, activities, presentations. I mean, and I think that we are oftentimes just the gay people. And I think that doesn't allow other communities to actually really know who we are and to see the beauty of the differences between who we are. You know, you look at this panel, this is like a rainbow, right? This is what we look like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great,
I would say that, yeah, just there is no uniformity of experience, you know, for anybody, whether it says you're a gay man or a lesbian or you know, whatever. So, you know, my experience is different from, you know, from my husband's. I grew up in a very different part of the country with very different parents, and he grew up with incredibly religiously conservative parents and family. And so the way that we approached coming out and sort of coming to terms is, you know, vastly different than if we look across our friend group. Same thing. If you talk to, you know, a friend of mine who's trans, you know, her experience is different from somebody else's experience who is trans. Like there is no sort of uniform experience, which sort of goes back to, I think, where we started in the importance of having the courage to have a conversation and to ask a question and to put yourself out there, even if you might feel stupid. And, you know, we had an experience this week, and I'll do a very quick anecdote where two of our friends came over with their 3 children. And there was a 12-year-old one who gave me a hug and said, I want you to know Caitlin and I are very supportive of the LGBTQ community. So I went upstairs, and then Caitlin was upstairs, and they are 14. And I repeated what Caitlin's sister had said. And Caitlin said, I identify as a non-binary lesbian. And their parents were there and just sort of looking at my husband and I. We were both kind of like, oh, crap, like, weren't expecting that. What do we say? And then I just sort of had to give myself a minute. And I asked Caitlin questions, and I was like, how have you been? How are things going at school? How has your friend group been? Do you feel supported? What are your pronouns? And so it's just kind of remembering that it isn't the same for any of us. And I think just like it probably would be the same for any straight person on, you know, what it's like growing up and choosing, you know, who they want to be with. And so it's all different. And I think if you just kind of approach it that way and ask questions, you will most often be met with a welcoming response and appreciation.
I have one real life example of this diversity within diversity. So I think this was a few years ago in the UK during Pride Month. And as we all know, everyone loves to jump on rainbow capitalism and cash on that. And Marks and Spencer had released an LGBT sandwich in its outlets. Good intention, obviously, to promote LGBT plus inclusion and stuff. But the sandwich had bacon, and Muslim people can't eat that. So by default, that was not an inclusive design. And the assumption that, yeah, so it's a very good insight into how sometimes when we're thinking about diversity, we're not being inclusive as well. And yeah, so even within the community, we need to account for those intersections and be respectful of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great segue into a couple questions that are coming up, and they're all really around this idea of how to be an ally and that whole, you know, intersection that we all have to be aware of, right? There's, you know, multiple places. So I'm going to just here's a question for Matt and Wheels, and it's really related to just, you know, how long you guys have been out in your experiences. So I'm going to read this right off. A lot of our older members of the LGBTQ plus, not that y'all are old, community went through many hardships.
I already there.
Not saying that. Went through many hardships that our younger LGBTQ plus folks have not. What can our younger LGBTQ plus individuals and allies alike do to continue the good fight that our older members started so long ago? Specifically, what can we do in the workplace at Prove to continue creating a diverse and inclusive space for all?
You want me to
Matt,
take that?
who wants to?
I'll go. And yes, I do feel old from that. It is true that the fight was more fierce, I would say, when I was younger. And Matt, I'll put you in the same category as me, when we were both younger. But that doesn't mean the fight is over. You know, we have made strides. we have much more of a presence in society today and much more accepted in society. But the fight isn't over. And Shiva mentioned the healthcare. I mean, healthcare is a huge issue for this community, not just for trans, but for the entire community. A lot of people are locked out of it. Marriage equality, I mean, we have it today, but it's very, very tenuous. I mean, I'm married, Matt's married. I'm not sure if you're married or not, but none of these things that we have in place today are on solid footing. So what I ask of the next generation coming up is to not let your guard down. I mean, I don't want you to live life guarded, but don't take it for granted that the privileges or the rights that we have today are rights that we're going to continue to have tomorrow. I mean, we almost lost some of them, not to get political, over the last 4 years. I mean, we were in grave danger of losing a lot of the rights that we had fought for. So that would be my request of the next generation to keep up the fight and stay aware of what's going on around you that may impact your community.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that, and I'll try not to be too political either. But yeah, there are still states where we can be fired, just by being vocal about who we are. So I would say there's a couple things. It's and I'll be older for the sake of this call. Thank you, Sandra. But a couple things. I guess I would say one, it's know that we're not there yet. And then I always like to take a step back. And I think, I'm in San Francisco and there's a bar here that was the first LGBTQ bar where they actually had windows where you could see in. And so anytime I'd be in a bar and somebody who was in their 70s or whatever, or 80s would come talk to me, it would be an honor. And I was very thankful for them and the things that they did before me. And yes, I'm doing things now as well. And I hope that the younger folks will continue to do the same. But in terms of being an ally, what I would say is be vocal and be intentional. It's great that people want to show up for a pride parade or a party or, do things like in that moment. But being an ally is 365 days a year. And it's also speaking out and speaking up when you see things that are being perpetrated against that community. So if you hear somebody, call, me a fag or whatever horrible word you could think of, where you hear somebody speak that, unkindly about people who are in this community, being an ally means having the courage to speak out and speak up in a very intentional, mindful way. And I think that to me is the most important thing. It's, when somebody who is gay or who is, Latino, who is non-binary, who is whatever, it personalizes it hopefully. And then it makes you kind of feel like a little bit more accountable and passionate around it. So I would just say, please be brave and speak out for others who are, maybe not a part of your, specific community, but just please speak up.
Well put. Shiva, anything else you would add?
No, that was beautifully, beautifully put.
Very well put. To the folks in the audience, feel free to send in your questions. Just jump in wherever you'd like. Either send them in. I guess we've got everybody on mute, so I think you have to send them in. I don't think you can just actually jump in. One thing that we've talked about in previous sessions is this whole concept of unconscious bias. And I think that also sneaks in to any conversations, with folks that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. I forgot the A. I can't get the letters right. But anyway, I think that's something that, I think we need to kind of think about as well. And I think unconscious bias kind of creeps into many different kinds of conversations. It's not even just, it's how do ideas get approved? It's how to get a project approved, as well as how we view people. And I think I'd be curious about that as well. If y'all have any thoughts there and how that has kind of impacted you all, or any suggestions, including anything you've seen in your workspace.
Very briefly, because I do a lot of consulting work in diversity and inclusion, and we had this one conversation about unconscious bias and how we need to sort of move away from conversing about unconscious bias and move into a more conscious sort of living, and just that terminology, because I think when we speak about unconscious bias, we talk about things that we're missing, but with consciousness, being mindful and conscious, being inclusive by default, that automatically centers the fact that we need to be mindful of everyone and not make assumptions. So it's just something that we have sort of figured out with our language and how we talk about unconscious bias, and need to move into a more conscious sort of approach.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that was very well said, and I agree with it. I like the idea of moving to the consciousness part of it. So it kind of seems like it's more we have it within our ability to control or to change or to at least try. But I think if I would say one thing about the unconscious part of it is just be honest. We all have it, right? On some level, in some ways, about some people. And I think people just tend to get very defensive if somebody dares to suggest that there is unconscious bias at play, because guess what? There usually is. And I think that there has to be some sort of basic acknowledgement that that can happen. And so then as you, I'll think of, or I'll speak to, the corporate America part of it, I look around leadership tables and very often people look like me, and there aren't a lot of other, diversity dimensions represented. And so then when you see that changing consciously and people are making decisions to have a diverse group of leaders or a team that better reflects the world that we are living in, you get better business results, you get a better dialogue, you have better decisions and better creativity, and just all these things that are gained by having the world represented. That's where we need to sort of move people to start thinking about. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Matt. I think. Sorry, just one quick point. I think that if we don't bring in the consciousness that Shiva is talking about, then we can't affect change, right? If we keep it unconscious, and so I will tell you right now, I have biases within my own community, outside of my community. It's the truth. But if we don't bring those to the forefront, then one, we can't address our own individual perspectives that might not be appropriate, but we also can't impact change. And, change is really important to do when it comes to biases. You have to change it for yourself and for the people around you, be a leader and a master to forward that way of thinking.
Yeah, I totally agree. For the provers that are on the call, y'all probably have heard me talk about working with Kim Hurwitz and Chris Varma as we, kind of come together to launch a diversity council. And one of the things that we're talking about is, the type of training that we might, embark on, along with a variety of things. But within that, the training side of it, unconscious bias is kind of at the top of the list. And hopefully, you'll see more about that, as we go closer, later this year, but more to come on that. I think that it's important that we acknowledge our, biases, and then, decide what we want to do about it. And sometimes we need, some training to get through that conversation. Okay, so what I'd like to do now, if possible, is allow folks from the audience to ask questions directly, if that's okay. Tyler, if we can unmute folks, just kind of be aware that there are a lot of folks on the call, so I don't, we'll have to be cautious about that, but I would like to maybe get a little more other voices besides mine. I have one question that's been teed up already, so I'll throw that one up there until anybody else wants to ask, unless somebody else wants to ask a question. So the question, and the person may need to kind of jump in, because I don't know if I have enough information, but the question is, how do you define being there? And the further is, from my perspective, it means constitutional change. Very hard to do, but not impossible. It takes activism from within and without, I believe, like many battles in our society. And so they're asking for you all to comment on that. Like maybe, when will we feel like we're there and have achieved, the level that is, I think, fair and equitable for this community. Shiva, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. When we talk about sort of allyship and to the question about showing up and being there and stuff, I think safety is most important for queer folk, trans folk, gender non-conforming folk. There is no point in promoting visibility and inclusion if there are no measures to ensure the safety of those being visible and included. And that means literally on paper, through actions, and in your heart. That needs to, that aspect of safety needs to be there in policy, through your actions. And again, from within, that needs to come through, because only then can we then ensure that they are able to be who they are without being policed, without being sort of harassed and that sort of stuff, and bullied and stuff. So 100% policies are very, very sort of, important. I'll start with that if anyone else wants to chime in.
It's and I'm glad you said that, because that isn't a part of the conversation very often. It's the safety of the community, especially like you said, trans women of color especially it's staggering, and I don't know that enough people are aware about it. So safety is the first thing, and then I would say anything short of, I'll sound a little activist here, but anything short of full equality without exceptions. And the fact that there are still so many exceptions, the fact that there are still so many people who are okay and comfortable with those exceptions, the fact that, I'll step into it here, that some of them are so often based off of religious doctrine as a reason to discriminate against people in the community. Those are things that we're going to continue we have to fight over, and we've been fighting for a long time, and we're going to keep fighting for a long time, because I don't, not to sound like a downer, but I don't see this changing in the next 6 months or year or 10 years even. This is anything short of complete safety for the community, and then I would say full equality. That's when we're going to be there.
Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I think that being there, to me, means that we don't have this conversation, right? There's no division. There's no need for dialogue. There's complete equality, safety, and understanding. So to me, that's the there.
Just to add, I know I started I started off with a very systemic thing. We need like policies for safety, but I mean that goes on in a very individual level as well. How are you making others feel safe in your conversations and in your day-to-day stuff? And it's sort of on an individual level, because I know change takes everyone, all individuals working together, and it starts obviously with the self, and it's how you choose to educate yourself, learn and unlearn all those conditionings, and sort of use your voice to sort of vocally champion queer people and not make assumptions about them, because I feel like trans inclusion in general is the bare minimum. It should be default, but we need to move on to trans celebration, upliftment, and that sort of stuff, the positive aspects. So I think we need the conversation in itself has to move towards that, and inclusion is just bare minimum. So
and I would say one more thing. I feel like sometimes examples are a really good way to illustrate what we're saying, and we're I think what is being said is right and fair and accurate. But I look at my own privilege and the way that I walk through the world, and I'm 195 pounds. My husband is 225 pounds. There are still the vast majority of places in this country where we wouldn't feel safe holding each other's hands, let alone any sort of heteronormative type of expression, where we just would walk down the street and we wouldn't do that, which doesn't feel natural to the way that we are and the way that we support each other and love each other and believe in our relationship. But the fact that that is still in our minds is a fairly good indicator of how much work needs to be done. And again, just thinking beyond that, the folks who are even more targeted and attacked, and that's how much work we have to do.
Yep.
Yeah, very well put. All three of you. Matt, Wheels, did I see you wanted to say something, or Shiva? Did somebody?
No.
Good. Okay. One thing that this brought to mind is, I think it was Tom Brokaw, who some folks might be too young to remember. He's a great newscaster. And when he wrote, we're all showing our age now, but he wrote a book, and it was his memoir, and one of his references was to the civil rights movement. And he said, we passed, so many laws. So back to the kind of policy and, in an attempt for safety. And there was just so much work that was done, during the civil rights movement. And, yet he felt like his biggest kind of reflection on that in terms of disappointment is that he felt like they did not change the hearts and minds of people. And I think that kind of gets to your point, Shiva, of, going beyond, the policies, beyond the laws, but you need those as the starting point. If you don't at least have those foundational pieces of human rights, it is a really, it's a really tough road. And so it's frustrating because, when I read that, I felt very moved by that. I thought, yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, the hearts and minds, and that's what we're dealing with today. We're still living with that. And I think that it should be kind of a call to action for all of us to, if we're allies, that it's got to go beyond policy, and we really have to learn to see each other as human beings and as people in order to actually move the needle, because the policies and the laws are just really, kind of table stakes. It's just the starting point.
Societal and legislative progress needs to go hand in hand. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
if I could, so that was my question. If I could just kind of throw a little more out, I guess where I was coming from as well. And I think that you guys are exactly right. It's got to be a policy that it's got to win hearts and minds, but you can't win the hearts and minds until you have a stick to beat some people over the head. And I hate to say it, but unfortunately that is the reality of our world, that you've got to have the carrot and the stick, right? That's just it. But what my fear is, and it's not just around this particular issue, it's around a lot of our societal biased issues. And so to me, bias is probably our biggest area where we use the word unconscious when none of us have unconscious bias. We know we have it. We just don't like to admit it. So we call it unconscious and it's not my fault. But we need to, how do we teach the next generation coming up from those of us that have been up and been fighting for this legislation change and doing this kind of thing? How do we teach them Facebook is not the answer for a legislative change? How do we get them involved and teach them the legislative process? Because that really is the stick that you can use with the carrot, right? And I get leery when I see all of this back and forthing on social media, and yet I don't see a lot of, at least, and I'm in Boulder, Colorado, so I'm in a fairly accepting with our biases community area. So how do we teach this generation how do we teach them to do it safely, to your points, right? Because there is a safety issue here. And how do we teach them that social media is not change?
That's a great question. I'm going to ask Shiva. Yeah, I think it's a great question for you, Shiva.
So apologies, but I think while yes, social media, people can get into sort of the rat hole of slacktivism and not translating action from online to actual sort of real life behavior, I would argue that social media has been a massive, massive propeller for change, especially amongst youth. You see people taking concepts of activism, putting them out in digestible content on TikToks and videos, and getting jargon being accessible to everyone, mobilizing people. Trump's rally was displaced by an entire TikTok video. So there is change happening where you can make, and in the UK, it was because of signing petitions online and viral posts that we were able to bring self-identifying gender nonconformity to the parliament to even have a conversation. So I would say that we shouldn't discount social media and the power of it being an agent for driving conversation. Yes, we need to ensure that that is sustainable and tangible, but I think there is great power in the youth mobilizing online, where they feel safer through online communities rather than being in physical spaces. And to be honest, even in person, like I was at Trans Pride last weekend over here in London, and majority of the people I saw were youth, like young people, Gen Z, millennials, and they were the ones who were most vocal and willing to put their bodies at the forefront to protect others. So yeah, I'm a huge champion for social media.
I think it's a combination of don't, use the social media the way it can be powerful. And at the same time, don't think that that's the only solution, that, just going out on, and making statements doesn't translate unless you understand how policies get made or unless you vote. That's another one. Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and pause here because I think there's a question that was, somebody would like to ask a question, I think Joey. So if we can open up his line, that would be great. I just want to make sure he has a chance to ask his question. Joey, are you there?
I'm trying. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Hi, Joey.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks everyone for being here. Appreciate y'all and this discussion. So as you all been talking so well about, there's obviously a great amount of diversity and just a variety of identities and viewpoints and lenses and presentations throughout the LGBTQ community. So often, though, as a very much similar to Matt, like as a white gay man, like I have to make sure that I'm open to those conversations with those lenses and perspectives and lifestyles that I'm not familiar with or not my experience. I have encountered through like several conversations with people throughout the community, people who are so wrapped up in their identity and wrapped up in kind of the identity politics of where they exist, that they have a really hard time seeing past and almost get offensive. I think someone had referred to that. How, I wanted to know from the three of you, how do you approach people who are so wrapped up? Because I feel like we in the community sometimes do use that, especially coming from a place of privilege, we can use that identity as a shield almost. Or like, no, I'm part of the community, so I have a right to feel this way. But how do you approach that type of defensiveness in kind of talking about those who are more at risk and more in danger of discrimination and violence from a place that promotes, positive, constructive dialogue rather than kind of devolving into argument and dissension?
Yeah, good question.
Wow, that's a big question, Joey.
It is.
You want me to start? I have a couple.
Go ahead, Matt.
So no, it is. It's a fantastic question, and I think often, and this sort of relates to like social media, the last 4.5 years of the U.S. specific answer of the country that we lived in, and the politics is, I think people tend to approach it less of a conversation and more of a, I'm going to prove to you why I'm right and you're wrong and you're bad and I'm good. And so if we're able to take a step back and just ask questions and try to understand, why somebody may have that point of view, or were they arrived at that, or are they aware of these data points? So I think if you come at it less attack oriented and more just sort of like, I want to understand why it is that you feel that way, then you're likely to have at least a decent shot of having a real dialogue. But it just doesn't seem that most of us are willing to approach it that way. It's like we sort of get so offended and so angry and so activated that we lose that ability to just sort of start from a place of like, is there 10 or 15 or 20% where we can come to like some sort of a center agreement or a willingness to listen more. So I think that is important, but it doesn't mean sort of falling on the sword and just swallowing the things that we know to be true. So I think if you started out that way, there's at least an opportunity to try to have a real conversation.
Joey, does that help? Oh, Wheels?
Yeah, that's okay. You sounded like a gremlin there for a minute. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it did spawn something that made me think, and that is, within our community, we also have, we talked about the differences, but we also have differences in the way that we present ourselves. There are lesbians who are, in your face, I'm a lesbian and I'm just going to be all about that. My gender identity, my sexual identity is something that's going to come first. We have the same thing throughout the different parts of the community. And for a long time, that was actually very difficult for me. And I felt uncomfortable around it, to be quite honest. And what I have learned through the years is that those people play an important role. I mean, if all of us could be Matt and blend into the background, then I don't mean that as an insult. I mean blend into the community around people, then we would never have conscious awareness and visibility the way that we do with people who wear their gender identity on their sleeve. Joey, I don't know if that's what your question was, but that's what it made me think about.
No, definitely.
What you're saying is that. Go ahead, Joey. Sorry.
I was just going to say, yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think those both spoke a lot to how best to approach those conversations and kind of understanding people across the community. I think, yeah, the question, and I go back and forth and just have a lot of different conversations with people across the community, especially over this last year. I feel like with the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and just all kinds of things happening in this vitriolic last year. And it often so much depends on the person and the openness with which they're willing to kind of let down that shield and be open to looking at those perspectives and looking at the validity, kind of what you were talking about, Wills, of hey, we don't, like, within the community we have all of these this variety that accomplishes so many things, that as a community together, like, we can continue moving forward. And if we can highlight that and come at it, like Matt was saying, from a place of not I'm going to prove you wrong, but I'm wanting to understand where you're coming from, but let me also show you where I'm coming from and where the community is coming from and where these folks with their different perspectives are coming from. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Joey, that was a very great perspective, Joey, that you just shared as a way to think through this. So I don't think we have any more questions. We are kind of getting close to our wrap up. Let me do a quick check. I don't think I see any questions coming in.
Sandra, if I might, there was a question earlier where it aged Matt and I by about 30 years, but there was a question about what role can people play at Prove to make it a better environment. And and I wanted to address that a little bit. From my perspective, Prove is a poster child for a comfortable place for somebody like me to work. And that is because there is no difference. I never feel a difference between me and you, or me and the next person, or you and the next person. I mean, it truly is a tight community. So when you ask what you can do to enhance the environment, I struggle, because I feel like it's so welcoming and open right now. I guess the one thing that I would say is, to make sure that the embraces that you bestow upon me, which means a huge amount to me, that you create the possibility to bestow that upon the other folks in the organization that are in this community as well. So that's the only thing I would say that would help. But it is a tremendous environment for I think a gay and lesbian and LGBTQ plus community.
Got it. Very good. Any other thoughts from anybody? Okay, well, I think we've had a great time together learning and celebrating. I want to thank our trailblazers, Matt and Shiva and Wheels, for helping us to be a part of the conversation and helping to educate ourselves on what it means to be inclusive, authentic, and an ally, and really kind of showing us how we can have a real dialogue amongst each other as a community. So first and foremost, thanks to all three of you. I have an ask of y'all, and I didn't tell you I was going to do this. I'm not going to put you on the spot, but as we are going to start building out our work around the Diversity Council, I would love for our little kind of early forming team to be able to tap into you all, if that's okay, to just kind of pick your brain. I'd love to hear your perspectives, and Matt, I think have a lot of experience in a corporate environment. Love to hear your perspective, and Shiva, I think you have a wealth of knowledge to share. And of course, we probably pick on you anyway, but I would love to be able to reach back out to y'all for some more perspective. I want to thank everyone in the audience for coming together to celebrate Pride Month with us. And just a reminder that we want to go beyond this month, right? And commemorate the struggles and accomplishments, both, right? The Stonewall Uprising, many of us that have lost loved ones during the height of the AIDS epidemic, this continued fight for human rights and safety and policy. Let's just continue to support each other and keep up the good fight. And maybe one more plug is for those of you that know that if you contribute to a Pride organization, you get a cool Pride t-shirt. I just want to model. Oh yeah, yeah, there you go. I was going to model it and I forgot I'm not on video. So yeah, there you go. Proof Pride. I always like to say, if you get a nugget or two, then I feel like it's been a great power hour. So hopefully, everyone got a nugget. And I also wanted just one last quote, and that's from our own Leslie O'Neill. I don't know if y'all saw her. This is in pretty early in the month, but this just really resonates for me. And she says that pride at its core is a true representation of humanity. And I just can't say it better than that. And with that, I want to thank everybody. And let's wrap it up and have a great rest of your day and rest of the Pride celebration. Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Wheels. Bye-bye.